Now this is the layout now on the standard one in the Legacy jet.
Colonel Ferreira does notice something potentially dangerous about the design of the Legacy's cockpit. If a pilot uses the built-in footrest during flight, his toes can come in contact with the buttons on the transponder.
Here, show me what it looks like in standby mode.
And when the transponder does go into standby, it would be difficult for a pilot to notice.
There's no alarm?
A small yellow warning light is the only indication that the transponder isn't on.
It was not easy for the pilots to detect that because it's not hooked up with the central warning and alert system.
But the pilots of the Legacy jet do not remember using the plane's footrest.
Still working out the kinks on how to work this flight management system. Time.
Investigators suspect that one of the pilots may have turned the transponder off by mistake.
The most probable scenario is that by accident, one of the pilots temporarily turned off the equipment as he tried to familiarize himself with the technology on board.
However, the transponder went off. At a critical moment, the crew had no last-ditch safety system to warn them that they were flying right at a 737. Even though the TCAS system on the Gol plane was working, there was no signal from the approaching jet for it to receive. Closing in on each other at 1,600 kilometers an hour, the pilots never saw each other coming. Brazil's air traffic control system would undergo some radical changes as a result of the collision. But those changes would not come without a fight. The investigation into the crash of Gol Flight 1907 has uncovered dangerous problems with Brazil's air traffic control system.
Brasilia, November 600 X-ray, Lima, level 370, good afternoon.
Two planes were assigned to fly at the same altitude in the same airspace.
Radar surveillance.
Overworked and inexperienced controllers in Brasilia neglected to instruct the Legacy jet to descend to 36,000 feet.
You have 5 aircraft. The Legacy is at 367.
Then they mistook the Legacy's planned altitude for its actual altitude. To make matters worse, the Legacy pilots, unfamiliar with Brazilian airspace, were unable to make contact with controllers on the ground. And somehow the transponder, which broadcasts their location in the sky, went silent, which controllers in Brasilia failed to notice. A multi-billion-dollar ATC system designed to keep planes apart had failed to detect two planes on a collision course.
Uma série de erros, de falhas humanas ocorreram e onde as defesas.
One by one, a series of human errors occurred, and all of the defense systems that exist to avoid these errors were defeated.
Esses erros foram sendo uma a uma vencidos.
A month after the crash of the Gol passenger plane, controllers begin a Work to Rule campaign. They want to draw attention to problems with the system.
Once they did start working to the rules and not stretching them anymore, this triggered what we called the aviation crisis in Brazil. At a certain point, maybe 40% of flights in all of Brazil had over an hour delays.
Following the crash and the work slowdown, changes start being made.
There has been a lot of changes in Brazilian aviation after the accident, specifically with regards to air traffic control. The Air Force had to admit that they had a shortage of controllers, and also there's a higher degree of accountability.
In the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration issues two recommendations as a result of the tragedy. Pilots flying legacy jets are warned of the possibility that putting their feet up in the cockpit could accidentally turn off the transponder. And manufacturers are told that an alarm should sound if the TCAS system shuts off. The controllers who were involved in the crash are charged with varying degrees of manslaughter. But those criminal charges worry people who were closely involved with the disaster.
Trabalhar uma investigação com fins de prevenção, quando existe uma...
An investigation like ours, which focuses on prevention, suffers huge setbacks when there is pressure to lay charges.
muito grande por ter sido o maior acidente.
By blaming people, we might be creating a culture where people will not come forth and be honest about failures and mistakes. And when we try to hide that, things get swept under the carpet, and soon enough they'll come out again.
Nenhum controlador sai de casa.
No controller leaves his home in the morning thinking he's going to crash a plane. And so the criminalization only interferes with investigations that can prevent further accidents.
Irá evitar novos acidentes.
More than 2 months after the crash, the crew of the legacy jet is finally allowed to return to the United States.
Joe and Jan barely got out of the country. There was an attempt to hold them under what I thought was a cobbled together initial criminal charge of, quote, failing to ensure the safety of Brazilian skies.
While we are all grateful for the safe return of Joe and Jan and everyone aboard the Legacy, we are all saddened by this tragedy which took many innocent lives.
More than a year after the accident, the legacy jet that survived a mid-air collision was still at the airfield in the Amazon. Its maiden voyage cut short by a tragic series of technological and human errors.